Hey, this is Wayne Forte from Entourage Talent in New York, and I'll be a guest on Promoter 101 at Polestar Live. Come on down and see us.
I'm Dan Steinberg, and welcome to episode 12 of Promoter 101. We've made a dozen of these things now. Luke Pierce is off this week, taking part in the wedding of Home Free's Tim Fouts. Congratulations goes out to our friend Tim and his beautiful bride, Jenica. Filling in for Luke is Tour Design's Bill Kittle. Welcome to the podcast, Kittle.
Happy New Year, Dan. I'm very happy to be here filling in for Luke, and I would also like to say congratulations to Tim and his beautiful bride, Jenica.
Bill, any New Year's resolutions this year?
Yes, I do have some resolutions this year. I would like to get married at least 2 times and divorced hopefully 4 times.
How does that work? You're just going to double down on those divorces?
Absolutely. I'm looking to marry twins. I think that's what I'm going for.
That sounds about right.
What about you, Dan? Any big resolutions for 2017?
Yeah, I really want to work more. I feel the need to spend more time at my desk creating more work for my team just to deal with. Now, in all seriousness, it's been a very busy year, and I just kind of want to take a moment to exhale in the new year. And with that said, Promoter 101 is going to be on world tour, so you can catch us live recording the podcast coming to a town near you.
February 1st, Polestar in Los Angeles.
The March 9th will be at ILMC in London, England.
Followed quickly, March 16th, South by Southwest in Austin, Texas.
And then April 21st at Canadian Music Week in Toronto, Canada.
Let's jump right into the news here, Dan. I don't know if you're aware, but Trey Songz got into trouble with the law for throwing a mic in Detroit. Seems typical for Detroit.
Sounds about right. 2016's death toll just keeps climbing, adding George Michael, Carrie Fisher, and now Debbie Reynolds to its midst. R.I.P. to all those legends.
Definitely R.I.P. But on a lighter note, the world saviors U2 sent out a message over social media wishing all a happy holiday and hinting at some concert dates in the new year, as well as what everybody knows, the 30th anniversary of the mammoth atomic album, Joshua Tree.
There's rumors growing that U2 will be headlining Bonnaroo this year as well.
Ooh, it's going to be hot and sticky out there. That'll be perfect for a 30th anniversary of Joshua Tree. I also understand hot and sticky that Ice Cube is going to start a 3-on-3 half-court pro basketball summer league, and, not confirmed, the Game may or may not be the referee.
Cube's just always keeping it gangsta.
Gangsta.
Hey, it's Brian Penix with NS2 and ABI Management. I'm going to be on Promoter 101.
Let's jump into some Promoter 101 tweets. As you know, we've got a couple of characters, Donald Trump at tweets, and we've also want to jump into the mind of Dan Steinberg and explore some of his Promoter 101 tweets from this past year. If you're not following Dan on Twitter, please be sure to do so. @TheJew. Here we go. When it's total your error and you need to pay to fix it because it's just the right thing to do.
One of my team misread an email. We failed to release some tickets a few days ago, and what was otherwise would have been sold. So it was our error, and we wound up buying some tickets to make the act whole. It just seemed like the right thing to do. We fucked up. We had to own it this time. So proving not all Promoter 101 tweets are about the industry fucking me. This time I fucked me.
At the end of the day, the person with the biggest address book wins.
So that tweet was really about something I think Lefsetz had said to me a couple years ago, I think maybe even written about, was whoever has the biggest address book wins. It's the most powerful thing. And I've learned to keep the most updated, well-to-do address book I can keep my hands on so I can find anyone I've ever worked with. Whoever has the best address book who can find people the quickest always does win. I truly believe this. Contacts are power.
Agree. Next tweet. If you want to work and rock and roll, it helps to be obsessive, compulsive, or workaholic that is available 24/7.
Honestly, this just tends to be the key to my success, as my IQ did not break the bank. So I just work nonstop, just try to get it done and be available all the time to everyone.
And you always are, and the industry appreciates that.
And that's it for tweets for the week.
For those of you that were at the Aspen Live Conference on December 8th, we saw a fantastic interview. For those of you that weren't, this week we are playing Dan's fireside chat with A.E.G's chairman and CEO, Jay Marciano, recorded live at the Aspen Live Conference on December 8th, as noted. It was a live session. There's also a question and answer session at the end that we have included as well for you.
Hi, this is Steve Martin, not the actor, not the PR guy, the agent from APA. I'll be on Dan Steinberg's perpendicular, fantastic, psychedelic Promoter 101 podcast from South by Southwest, Thursday, March 16th.
Welcome to our fireside chat, and while we don't have a fire, we do have the number 19 on the Billboard Power 100 list. Jay Marciano is joining us today. Yeah. For those of you that do not know and have been living off the grid for the last few decades, Jay is the Chief Operating Officer, Chairman of A.E.G. Live. He is responsible for the overall operational oversight of A.E.G. Live for Anschutz Entertainment Group, a.k.a. A.E.G. How much do I get every time I say A.E.G. again? Before his days at A.E.G. Live, Jay came from a military family where his father was a colonel in the United States Air Force. Stationed in Europe, during this time, Jay attended boarding school in Frankfurt, Germany. His family later settled down in Colorado Springs, where Jay attended school at CSU Fort Collins and CU Boulder. As he turned 21, he opened a music store in Fort Collins, then Denver, and Boulder. He started promoting concerts and dabbling in management with a young artist by the name of Prince. In the 80s, Jay took on booking the Beverly Theater in Beverly Hills, California, where he caught the eye of competitors at Universal Concerts, where Larry Vallon quickly hired him away to book the Universal Amphitheater. Later working to open many of the sheds across North America, including Denver, Atlanta, Dallas, Cleveland, and Toronto. In all, spending 18 years at Universal Concerts wearing a bunch of different caps, but ultimately as president and CEO. Later spending 6 years at Madison Square Garden Entertainment as president, moving on in 2011 to become the president and CEO of A.E.G. Europe, before finally returning back to the States to captain the massive ship that is A.E.G. Live. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Jay Marciano!
I feel old.
They like you, dude.
This is your life. Here it is.
Jay will take your questions at the end of the session, but before that, start thinking about what you might want to ask him when we talk. What's his favorite boy band? Or whether he sees himself more as a Charlotte or a Samantha.
You'll have to explain that one to me later.
The women got it. Jay, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
I'm told by Elliot Lefko that you're an amazing drummer. Larry Vallon says you're a skilled guitarist. Before you made your living behind the scenes, did you ever think about making it on the stage?
Number one, that was a long time ago. And I think, like many people in this room, many of us were in bands. Some of us came to the conclusion that, I'm probably not good enough. I'm good, but not great. So from there, went on to the music store as another. But yes, I fell in love with music as a musician, and I got my first guitar when I was 8 years old, and has been playing and now collecting ever since.
And how many guitars do you have now?
If you promise not to tell. I think I'm up over 100 guitars, mostly all of them vintage, almost all of them from the 50s and 60s, and heavily weighted towards Gibsons.
Just envision like walking to the bathroom, tripping over guitars in the middle of the night.
They're all in storage in Denver, but I'm threatening to move some of them to Los Angeles soon.
So in your Universal concert days, you worked directly with the chairman, Lou Wasserman. What was that like?
Well, I like to say I've worked for 3 billionaires, and they're all different, and they all have different styles, but during the most formative years, I started at Universal Studios when I was 29 years old. And, the great thing about Lou Wasserman, I hope most of you know who he is in this room, but probably for 30 years, he was, the most powerful, most revered entertainment executive in Hollywood. And he was a classic impresario. He started off as a PR guy for a local movie theater in Cleveland, and then moved to Los Angeles, started an agency, which was MCA, which, by the way, got so big that the government had to break it up. That's to give you an idea how big they got. And Lou was smart enough. Lou didn't sell the agency. He didn't sell MCA. He just disbanded it. He didn't take the money. Why would he do that? Because he didn't want to have to deal with a strong agency on the other side, because he was growing Universal Studios. So he didn't want to have all of those people that he taught in one company on the other side of the deal. Smart guy. But, Lou was a visionary. He figured out so many people wanted to walk on the movie lot and see what was going on there that he created Universal Studios Tour. And we talk about entertainment destinations. They created City Walk. That was probably the first of its kind in the world. And on and on. He was a serial entrepreneur, but he was also very disciplined. And he was also the kind of guy that negotiated very tough, but if you had a handshake from Lou Wasserman, it was good as gold. Lou, because he came from the agency business and he was booking bands and he was good at it, he loved the live business, even though we were probably the smallest part of the company. So I got to know Lou when you'd get that phone call from his assistant, and he'd say, what are you doing for lunch today? And you'd say, oh, nothing. And she said, well, Lou would like to see you in the commissary. And Larry Vallon and I we always kept suits on our back door. We'd quickly go in the bathroom, put the suit on, and then go have lunch with Lou in the commissary. Lou always had like one piece of paper, which was your numbers. And he just had such a mathematical mind that he would go through your bookings. At that time was just the Universal Amphitheater. And he'd say, how much you paying this guy? And you'd tell him, $50,000. You're going to lose money. And, the next deal, he'd look through it. But he had the ability to be able to tell.
Was he right?
Always. And there's a lot of stories about Lou's mathematical mind and his ability to get to the number way before all the accountants could on deals. So anyways, that was a great person to learn from. Not just about business, but how to conduct yourself in business and what culture means and what loyalty means. And I attribute a lot of my success today to the things I learned from Universal when I was growing up.
Well, I want to go from one God to another. You booked the Pope not just once, but twice. How do you go about doing that, and what were the per heads like?
Yeah, the per caps there was no beer and wine per caps to speak of, but the religious artifacts, they did pretty good on both those days. We had the Pope at, many of you know, at Universal Amphitheater, and for me as a Catholic boy growing up with a Catholic father, it wasn't the Beatles, but it was pretty close, to do that. And, then he played as well at the Garden when I was there. And when you think, and we've all been around those shows where you have, maybe it's the President of the United States or some dignitary and the amount of security and planning that goes into that, dealing with the Vatican is a whole nother layer. It's God's way. And so you end up, sort of just standing down and doing it the way they want it because they have a way of doing that. But, all good fun and all good events.
Universal sold to House of Blues. How did that lead to your departure from the company?
Okay.
I really picked my words on that carefully, by the way.
This is a true story. At the Universal Concerts, which was really, in its time, was one of the larger concert divisions, and companies out there promoting. I think at the time, we had built it up to 12 amphitheaters. So we were by far and away the largest amphitheater operator in North America and therefore the world. And when Edgar Bronfman bought Universal, he went off on a buying spree on other things. You might recall he bought Polygram, which then turned into Universal Music Group. But he spent about, at the time, $500 million buying Polygram. And the deal took so long to close that they locked the currency in at Dutch guilder, and there'd been a 20% decrease in the value of the dollar in the deal, so the deal got 20% more expensive.
That's not normal, right?
You would think that these are all experienced deal makers, that they would have locked in a currency at the time, but it took a long time to close. There was a lot of government processes that they had to go through, a lot of government approvals required because of the size of the deal. So I got a phone call one day from Zach Horowitz and said, I just heard from Edgar and I've got some bad news. I said, what's that, Zach? He says, he wants to sell the company. You never want to get that call. You've spent 15 years building it up, and we were doing really well, and we were very profitable for the company. And sort of my deal was, okay, I'll help you sell it. They wouldn't let management take a shot at it, by the way, buying it. But we sort of like to have a vote at the end.
That's you, right, management?
Yeah, the management team.
They wouldn't let you buy it.
Because the first question out of your mouth is, can I go raise the money? And the answer I got back is, no, we've hired Goldman Sachs. They're going to run a process. You guys have seen this. It's a beauty contest. And you put together the book, and you're out before you know it doing sales pitches. But sort of the deal, the handshake with Zach at that point was, can we have a vote at the end? Because the last two parties standing was then the SFX and Robert Sillerman and a hedge fund that had just bought House of Blues. So to the management team at the time, that looked like a more attractive place for us to land, which was to be part of the House of Blues organization with hedge fund, and they, at the time, promised a lot of capital that they were going to invest in the business. So, am I going into too much detail here? I don't know if it's interesting or not to you, but I said this to Bob last night. That kind of money is the most impatient money. So they did something, and if I was a more experienced executive, I would have caught this, but I didn't. I missed it, which was, it was just, you can look it up, but it's a big one. There were actually three big ones that came together to do this. And, we had ratcheted the value, which at that time was a lot, to nearly $200 million deal, to be a lot for a concert company. But they promised they were going to put a lot of cash in the business, and what ended up happening is they put a lot of debt against the business. So everything, which is classic, and I should have seen that coming, I didn't see that coming. So everything that we made, they were using to pay down their debt, the debt that they had used to acquire the business. So, which left us on the sidelines for 3 years at the time that I was there, meaning that I continued to watch SFX grow and us stay flat. We weren't opening more House of Blues. We weren't building more amphitheaters. We weren't doing more tours.
You did somehow sneak in San Diego in that time.
Well, I had that previously approved and paid for by Universal.
But that came in that time, though, right?
That came right at the time of the transition that came. So it was frustrating. It was frustrating for me. It was frustrating for the people that had been loyal to me for a lot of years and had worked together with. And I started just sort of emotionally checking out. It wasn't fun to come to work anymore. It certainly wasn't stimulating. The shows and the events and the business that was being run, we all could have done in our sleep because it was something we were so familiar with. And at some point, they came to me and said, we'd like you to step down. which I should have probably stepped down before that because I wasn't having any fun that last year. You have a contract, you do the normal things, they're going to buy you out of your agreement. And so I was out of work for 2 days, and then Tim Lewicki called me.
Wait, 2 days?
Yeah.
Okay, so what did Tim say? How did that fold you into the A.E.G family?
Well, those of you that know, Tim was like, I got a place for you, come on over here, we got you covered, don't worry, we need you here, we're growing a company, we're going to be in the music business, and it's going to be great. And, that's Tim, right? We all know Tim. It's like in best salesperson, but short on detail. And Tim was great. I went over, met with him, met with Phil. Phil said, we're building this company. At that time, they had Concerts West and a name. There's probably half a dozen employees. Amy was one of them. Amy was on board early. And Phil said, we need operators. And I said, Phil, I've been running this business now for 18 years, and I'm not so sure I want to run a business right now. I might want to take a little time off. And he said, well, why don't you help us with business strategy, help us figure out this business. So he created this title, Chief Strategy Officer, which meant nothing. It meant that I could go and help him build a business. And, during the time, I spent a couple years there before I was recruited to go to MSG. But we did things like the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. There were a number of things that we did during the time period that I was there that are still strong parts of the A.E.G portfolio.
You've a history of picking up your life and quickly moving not just around the country, but around the world in seemingly moments. Is that your secret to success?
There's a lot of ways to do this. And I think probably because my dad was I was in the military. I was in the military. My dad was in the military. Every 3 years we were packing our bags and moving somewhere else. So the idea of moving on was just something I grew up with. It wasn't difficult for me to think about that. And I never was the person that lived in a market and held down a market as a regional promoter. That was never me. I think I got into it too late. Barry Fay, when I was in Denver, was too strong. There wasn't a place for another promoter at the time. So the idea of traveling and still being able to do what I do and get to do it in exciting places. So I was able to do that in Toronto and do that in London and do that in New York City. These aren't slouch places to live and work. And when you have these kinds of businesses that there's plenty of capital to do things for good ideas, that becomes an exciting place to work. And you get the benefit of being able to do it and live in different places.
The CEO of Live Nation, Michael Rapino. Do you know who that is?
The other Italian.
Okay, good. He commented recently on the Recore Media podcast, A.E.G doesn't compete with Live Nation globally. Do you find that statement accurate?
Listen, Rapino's a smart guy, but that's a fallacious statement. This is just so inaccurate. I mean, as I sit here and I try to respond to that, would be that...
You've heard that before, though, right?
Yeah, I've heard that, but I say this not to be boastful, but if you were to add up the assets that A.E.G has outside of North America, it would be worth a lot more than all of Live Nation is.
So you are doing shows outside of North America?
I mean, what about Hyde Park? What about Shanghai? What about, we just got done taking Justin Bieber all the way through Europe and now Asia and the rest of the world, so...
So you're saying he might be wrong?
No, I'm just saying that maybe he doesn't feel we're competitive with them outside. I don't know. You can't be in this business at this scale and not be global.
So Live Nation's a public company. As such, they have to report their numbers quarterly versus A.E.G being privately held, meaning that you don't have to tell anybody what you make. But will you tell us here and now, are you profitable?
I will say in this room we're very profitable.
Great. Will you tell us how much?
No. We're not going to do that.
I took a shot.
We're not going to do that, but I'll just put it in some context, which is we're probably, 35% of their revenue, and I will tell you our concert company makes more than theirs does, so you can do the math off of that.
So you do look at their reports?
Of course. But as for the differences between private and public, and I've worked in both, in fact, probably spent more time in public working for public companies than private companies, but the competitive advantage of private capital can't be outweighed. It completely changes the way that you approach the business, gives you a much more long-term view. Nobody's looking over our shoulder except one person. And that person also happens to be one of the greatest entrepreneurs I've ever come across. And he knows how long it takes to build businesses, and he understands the capital required and the mistakes that you're going to make along the way. And not everything's going to turn out the way you thought when you went into a deal.
So that changes your management style, being a private company, not being public?
I used to have to sweat out, just like I know Michael does. The last job at the Garden, those sort of quarterly earnings calls, and those of you that worked at public companies. And I used to say I'd lose a month every quarter just preparing. And that's just making sure we've got the Q&A, the spin, the documents. And those were very unproductive months. So when you add it up, those are like 4 months out of the year that you could be out doing other things. And I found that to be completely satisfying at A.E.G, where, for instance, we just finished the budget for next year. We do monthly forecasts. That's it. That's the extent of it. We review that with Denver. And when we need capital, the beauty of the way Phil allows us to operate our business, which to me is the best place I've ever worked, is that he pretty much lets us do what we want to do every single day. Rarely does he get involved. He likes to know what's going on, but he rarely micromanages. And the only time that he wants to hear from us is when we're making investments. And think about that for a second. Whether it's $1 million or $100 million, if it was my money, I'd want to know where my team was investing it. And that's not an unreasonable request to say, come talk to me about this deal that you want to do and tell me about it. So far, he hasn't turned me down on anything I wanted to do. He gives us the freedom to operate the businesses on a day-to-day basis.
Told that your payroll is now over $100 million. Is that true?
It's actually closer to $200 million.
Fuck.
But, that encompasses all of G&A. That would be benefits, payroll, office leases, that kind of thing. It's, so I wake up every year thinking about that I got to get to 200 before I make $1. Just think about that. So when everybody's counting your money about how much they think you're making, the first 200 just is, pretty much that's fixed. And everything above that, we start to make a profit.
$200 million. Who's your favorite employee?
They're all paid pretty well, right?
I assume that's more than one person, right? So your staff tells me they don't consider you a micromanager. How hands-on are you?
Let me answer that by saying that our structures, probably the best example, and I've used this before, is, and it's not a perfect example, but let me explain this to you. It's a little bit like how Universal Music Group would work, in that they've got label presidents that run their own businesses, that have their own teams, get to hire their own people, work with the artists that they want to work with, bring in projects that they want to do. And our structure is such that we've got really strong presidents out in the field, and we have really strong partners. And you treat partners differently than you treat employees. And the partners that we have, whether it's Paul Tillett, there's a long list, Barry Marshall, Louis Messina. I won't go through all of them, but most of those are well-known names in this room. They're our partner, and they're usually our 50% partner. And you treat partners differently, but we're there to support them. We're there to vet ideas. We're there to take advantage of the scale that we're building to make sure that we're not losing any opportunities that might be available. But I'm happy to hear that my employees say that I hold the reins loosely. I have been accused by a few heads of agency for holding it too loosely as some of the people start to go left field, and the agents call me up and said, you need to rein that person back in. But
well, $200 million, how many employees roughly do you figure that is?
Well, just at A.E.G. Live, A.E.G's 10,000 employees, but A.E.G. Live's a little over 1,000 full-time.
So it's a big fucking Christmas party.
We can't afford to have the Christmas party.
So you guys have 34 festivals across America now. Building and acquiring festivals seems to be a battleground between A.E.G. and Live Nation at the moment. Why?
Well, if you get it past a certain point, it's a great business. And it's a business that seems to be resonating with music fans. The idea of sort of an immersive music experience where you get to sample a lot of new artists, do it in a social environment with your friends, pick and choose the schedule that you want to do. The challenge will be, one, that at some point there'll be too many, as there are in Europe. And most of the European promoters will tell you that that's the problem that they face, is that it's a mature business in Europe. And it's quickly approaching that in the U.S. That's not to say that there can't be smaller regional festivals that are 1 or 2 day events that take place in regions for the music fans that can't afford to fathom the idea of, going to a Coachella or a Stagecoach or even, Jazz Fest fans in New Orleans. But at our company, we have 3 segments of the business, and it's what it's touring, and we have 5 touring units that take care of the touring divisions. We have the regional offices, and they all have their own teams that operate the regions. In the regional offices, some of them have regional festivals, and most often they have clubs and theaters, that report into them. And then you've got the 34 festivals. And each one of those festival operators are entrepreneurs, and they have their own ideas about how their festivals should operate. My view is that we've got pretty good festivals, got a great portfolio. I think we have some of the best festivals. I think many people in the room would be able to name probably at least 10 of ours. And hopefully you've had a chance to come to some of them. And we continue to, a lot of our winnings are poured back into the business. Some of the winnings are used for future acquisitions, but most of the winnings are poured back into the business to make sure our clubs, theaters, venues, and festivals are the best.
So what's the advantage to building one versus buying one?
I get asked that question a lot. And we've tried to buy a few. We bought a few. Mostly we built the festivals that we have. I think if you're Live Nation, once again, this would be the difference between private and public. They don't have the time to wait. They're being, every quarter somebody's second guessing them. So they need to go buy revenue and go buy EBITDA, and they don't have the time to say, well, let's see how this turns out in 3 years. Because majority of the festivals, and some of you in this room may have your own festivals or you're associated with it, a festival, but it takes at least 3 years most of the time to get to break even. So they're capital intensive. You got to have a lot of staying power. And we're not always right. We failed at a number of our festivals. We've walked away after from a few things saying, yeah, that's probably not going to work out. Let's quit pouring capital into that. But, the advantage is that I've got the luxury of time. And if you're going to go out and pay a 10 multiple, but you can get to profitability in 3 years, it's a much better use of capital, and it's a much better investment.
Is that what they're going for now? A name festival is about 10 times earnings?
If you're buying a major festival, you're probably at a 10X, somewhere in that area.
How important is it to come out of the gates this first year? How important was it on Panorama and Desert Trip?
They're both very different. I'll start with Panorama. Panorama was, I'll say this, the company has, as you know, a big stake in London, big stake in Los Angeles, and a lesser stake in New York. And we've always viewed that as one of the missing pieces to A.E.G., and we were always trying to figure that one out. We have a small office there, we have a few venues there. We've been reasonably successful, but not as successful as a company like ours wanted to be in a place like New York City. We know we had to do a couple of things. One is, and this deal will close, we can talk about that later if you like, but the Bowery deal will close by the end of the year. So that's a great addition.
Oh, God, that only took a minute.
Thank you. That's been a long time in the making. And we believe that will be a great cousin on the East Coast to Golden Voice's, prominence and presence on the West Coast. And we needed to have a festival as part of that. It's not enough just to have, clubs and theaters and be a regional promoter. We needed to put together a festival. We knew it would be tough. We thought we had, I think probably some of you read about it, we thought we were going out to Queens. We didn't get the site that we wanted, so we ended up at Randall's Island. But, it was curated, and I say both curated by the artistic talent as well as the look and feel of the event. It was done by the Golden Voice team, and they did a fabulous job. We lost real money. We'll probably lose real money this year, and hopefully by year 3, we'll turn the corner, start breaking even on that. Now, Desert Trip is completely different. No one went into that thinking it was a festival. It was just a big event. And we don't know whether there'll be another Desert Trip. We fantasize about it, but...
At this point, you don't know if there's going to be a year 2?
We haven't made an offer to a single artist yet for year 2. We're thinking about that, but we're not there yet. Listen, we had a Beatle and the Stones and Dylan and the Who. We had... It's hard to put together a lineup that could be a better lineup or as good a lineup.
You set the bar, dude.
We were fortunate. When you think about it, 4 of those 6 artists are artists that tour with A.E.G. Rolling Stones tour with A.E.G. And we just picked up Roger Waters in the Who tour with A.E.G. And Paul McCartney tours with A.E.G. through Barry Marshall. So because we had, I'll call them intimate relationships with the artists, and they already trusted us, when Paul Tillett went to meet with them, they were also not just talking to A.E.G. as their tour promoter, but they're talking to Paul Tillett, the founder of Coachella. They knew that we could put on a serious event, and they knew that we'd make them look good in an event like that. So obviously Bick was the last to say yes. Paul could tell you about it someday, but that was a personal meeting. And when he said yes, we were off and running.
So convincing the Who to open for someone had to be a little bit of a work.
Listen, they acquitted themselves very nicely. They are, I think, definitely in the top 3 if people were, as you couldn't help but sort of rank the performances each weekend of these artists. But people tend to underestimate the Who, and they always over-deliver, and they always surprise you. And because, once again, they toured with us, they wanted to be part of this bill, and they were willing to do that. And every band got full production. Every band went on after dark. So it wasn't like they were shortchanged in terms of their presentation.
So are you ever overwhelmed between the venues, the festivals, the touring, the ticketing, and everything else on your plate?
Overwhelmed.
Fair question,
moment
right?
in time, and I'm not over. No, yeah, it's. I wouldn't say it's overwhelming. I think that if anyone, forget me, just anyone that's in my position, the one thing you want to be able to be is available to your team. And while I'm glad to hear I hold the reins loosely, I think that it surprises you how many times they really need you. They need you when they're doing a new executive employment contract. They need you to talk about this big guarantee that they want to put up. They need to tell you about the fight they just had with an agent or a manager and fill you in. So when you look across the business, even though we got great people, there's a lot of time that's spent on that. And you want to make sure that you have time for your staff, but you also want to make sure that you're driving the business forward, that you're executing on the vision, that you are growing it, and you're closing out a few deals. So you sort of juggle your days into parts, and some days are obviously more time spent with the team, and other days more time on growth strategy.
Can you walk us through your process in an acquisition, what you're looking at, what you're looking for, how that works internally?
Yeah, I think, and this would be true for most businesses, the first consideration is it strategic. By having this being part of the A.E.G. portfolio, does this make us a stronger, more attractive, more valuable business? So, and that could be a 300-seat club or it could be a 100,000-person festival. So that's the first question you have to ask. Then you're taking a view of the competitive landscape. Are you going to be just, butting heads with another promoter in the market? What will that look like? And there's a competitive assessment that needs to be done in trying to determine that. The last thing I look at, and which probably most people start with it at the beginning, are the business assumptions. And I've learned after doing this for a long time that you can get the numbers to say whatever you want them to say. You can say, we're going to do 200 shows a year when there's nothing to back that up. It's not a fact-based decision. It's just you're winging it at that point. And the only way that you get comfort is to do what everyone does, which is high, middle, low cases, and you start to evaluate that. I would say that our batting average when it comes to new venues is really strong. I think that the team has gotten really good at, one, making sure the assumptions are correct. Two, and we've done everything wrong on the venue side. And most of the mistakes that we've made is trying to make some of the club venues too nice. So some of the venues that we poured $20 million into, we would have been better off pouring $5 million into, because whatever vibe the $5 million club is more attractive to music fans and more attractive to artists often than the $20 million venue.
So the Bowery acquisition took a long time, but you just said that came to an end. What's the next acquisition for A.E.G? Is there something you can talk about?
Oh, yeah, I was going to come here and tell you that. No. You're not going to talk about... Listen, there's always I'll call it the development queue. I've never seen anything less than 10 things that we're considering at one time. And when you're out in the development side of the business, everything sort of gets done at its own pace. You might want to establish a close date. We're going to close on December 12th or else, and that never happens. The Bowery deal, the money was the easy part. Really, you have two strong entrepreneurs that built this business up, and they wanted to make sure the marriage was going to go well. So there was well over a year of, I'll call it dating, which is basically dinners and come out and see how we operate, come to our events, go to their events. And you're doing all this, and you're trying to keep it a secret, which is hard to do in the music business. And then getting the deal closed, like a lot of entrepreneurs, they had literally dozens of minority investors and consents on leases changing hands and that kind of thing. And it took forever to grind through that because it wasn't like we were dealing with a single entity that owned all of the businesses. They had a lot of partners. And something like that can take a long time to close. Other deals, we can close. Somebody will walk in, we agree on the money, we do a handshake, and the deal will close. And some things move faster. Usually when the seller has control of their business and they want to make a deal, you're going to close a lot faster than when you're trying to convince someone to sell and they have to go back to minorities to get approval.
Would you ever consider buying Live Nation? I mean, A.E.G. Live Nation's kind of got a ring to it.
I don't think the government would let us do that. Usually number one and number two merging is, any kind of acquisition you'd never get clearance on that. But listen, we're happy with the business that we built. And, Gary Gersh said something to me a few weeks ago, and I've been using it a lot. And Gary probably doesn't know this, but, we're quiet, but we're really strong. And we're not as noisy as some of the other folks out there, but we can do any deal we want to do. We have unlimited capital. We can make the moves that we want to make. We can work with the artists that we want to work with. And I think that's an attractive place to come to work if you're that kind of person. If you're the kind of person that doesn't need a lot of oversight and wants to do a few things, this would be a good place to come to work.
So what's currently getting you excited? What gets you hard?
I don't know how I would love to say that, or like to say that you guys are all doing as well as, the whole business is doing well, I think. And there's a lot of theories floating out as to why it's doing well. I look at it as sort of the demos. The demos of the boomers support that they're activity and event-driven at this point in our lives. And I put myself in the category of boomers. And what I mean by that is boomers don't need another automobile or another home or another set of dishes or whatever. At this point, they've got a list of things they want to do while they're still physically able to do it. And they're going out. And they're spending a lot on tickets. And they'll spend a lot if the event and the environment and the presentation is fun to go to. And we're finding that out. On the other side of it, the millennials, of which I have 18-year-old twins, they just turned 18 last week, but we raised a whole generation of kids that go to activities every day. I mean, sometimes 2 activities a day. And going to things and going out is just a way of life for them. And it's not like, frankly, I hate to say this, but it may not even be that special going to shows because they go to a lot of shows. They like a lot of different kinds of music. So that has helped the live thing. And it goes back to what we've always said is you can't replace that experience. And you certainly can't replace it in the digital world.
Access has become a major player in the ticketing space. What do you see happening next in ticketing?
That's a big topic. Ticketing is a huge topic, and it's probably...
I think you can handle it. I got faith in you.
I have faith in ticketing. Look, everybody's going to have their view on where they think this is going. And I know one thing, the business that, and I'm going to give Fred Rosen credit for this, the business that he invented, and I think I was saying that to Bob last night, the business that he's invented hasn't changed a lot. The deal structures are the same. It's the same software from 35 years ago. And it's the same software because it's hard. Everybody says, oh, we can write code and we can do this and can do that. And there's 50 other, small companies that are startups that are in the space right now, and they do one thing really well, but to do it all really well, to handle all of the client's needs, whether that's selling tickets in arenas, not just the concerts, it's the teams are incredibly complex because their subscriptions are very complex.
You mean the sports teams?
Sports teams. They've got subscriber bases that buy 4 tickets, that buy 8, that buy mini packs, that buy half, and they want to carve up the bill and the invoicing, and they want to make sure their friend paid for half, and that requires a different kind of a ticketing system than it does to sell a festival ticket. And a festival ticket is, is there camping, is there parking, is there this or that tagged onto the ticketing? That's a very different kind of sale. But the one thing I believe in is that the idea that exclusive venue contracts will continue to exist in 5 years, I question. And that's the business that we grew up with. As a practical matter, we had to have one ticketing company.
So more like in Europe where ticketing is more of a marketing
it'll
platform?
grow much more like Europe. And I think we will be all advantaged by having more ways to distribute our tickets. And we did a test last year with Amazon in the UK at Hyde Park, and they outsold everyone, and they're not in the ticket business. And what's that? Oh, yeah. But the point was their brand is so big, and why not use Costco or why not use other, that have bigger databases that already have their credit cards on file. And so the idea of who's advantaged by a ticket model that really is exclusive, well, Ticketmaster, that's good for them, I get that. But I think for fans and for venues and for artists, having multiple points of sales is a much better way to distribute tickets. And we always talk about getting the word out. Those other brands are bigger than us, and they have bigger budgets, and they have bigger reach. So the idea that, and I'll give away a little strategy here, we as Access, we went into this 5 years ago. We went into it because Live Nation merged with Ticketmaster, and the idea of having your primary competitor sell your tickets just didn't sit very well with us. And it's been complicated. We have struggled, and I think we're turning the corner. I think we have finally a software platform that we like. But the view is that when we're satisfied with the way we're selling tickets on our own platform, we're going to open it up. And you're gonna see because somebody has to lead on this issue, and it has to be us. So we'll take our 30 arenas and our clubs and theaters and others, and we will start to say, promoter, what system do you want to use? There'll still need to be a host system. Somebody's got to keep track of where all the money's going and make sure the wire transfers and all of that take place. So there will be a host system, but there'll be allocations much like Europe. So the promoter might have 50% of the inventory to put wherever they have deals, wherever they have sponsorships. You might have a deal with Amex. American Express sells a lot of tickets.
You were insuring a lot of accountants' jobs.
It's not that complicated, and frankly, the O2, which everyone knows is the most successful arena in the world by a lot.
And that's yours?
That's ours.
Okay.
Does 200 concerts a year in an arena, and 50% of the tickets aren't sold by us, by the venue. It's sold by others. So I know that part's changing. The other side of that... Who are the others? I'm going to draw
the whole thing in Europe
yeah.
is that there's a marketing platform involved with each ticketing system, so they're not so much exclusives, and you give allotments to everybody to get to their marketing base, almost how we do with the discounting in the States.
If you're Simon Moran, you have a site called Gigs and Tours is the name of your site, and you're selling your own tickets through your own site. You have your own database, and you have your own relationship with the fan direct, except not through a third party, not through a Ticketmaster and Access or someone else. And there's like 25 different small companies, but they sell tickets. In the aggregate, we use, and for something like Hyde Park, we'll use 6 different ticket companies to sell the tickets.
Let me talk to you about 2015 at Live Matters Conference. You said during an interview with Ralph Simon, 70% of the tickets sold through all our venues right now are sold through the data and not through traditional media. Fucking geeking out on this. Can you expand on it?
Amy's here. She could really help us on this one. But, at what point do you turn...
That's true, right?
It's true. And it's only moving in one direction. And at what point do you turn off the traditional media buys? Some of that's great brand building for the artists. Some of it's vanity. Some of it does sell some tickets, admittedly. But just look at the size of the pre-sale where you're selling out arenas on pre-sale. And that's all data-driven. It's somebody's data. It could be ours, could be the venues, could be the artists. But in the aggregate, the data is driving the sales. How you manage the data is complex. And I'd love to tell you we've got it sorted out. I think a lot of people are trying. We don't have it completely sorted out, but I think we're feeling good about the progress of that. And you were talking about overhead a minute ago. Amy knows this. We just approved a $10 million marketing budget for next year, and it's all personnel. So it's all people. It's not even about the software. It's not about whether we're keeping our data in the cloud. It's not about that at all. It's about, someone has to be your Facebook expert. Someone has to be your Twitter expert. Someone has to be an expert at buying digital media. And someone has to manage your database. And someone has to be able to analyze it.
You're more than just capturing email addresses.
Oh, yeah, no, it's no longer the phone book. I mean, I think when we first started, it was, hey, we got a lot of names, just to hit them all. And, now we've gotten much better at finding and knowing where those music fans are and what it is that they're interested in seeing.
Before we jump into the room, I want to ask you one more question. How has the promoter-agent relationship changed in your eyes?
Show of hands, how many agents do we have in the room? Uh-oh.
Will you tell us anyway?
No. It's changing for a lot of reasons. One has to look no further than CAA or William Morris Endeavor to realize that they've wandered over into our lane, meaning that William Morris Endeavor right now, I had Ari Manuel the other day tell me, we do 47,000 events. Now, Ari's taking credit for every show that he sells, but he's also counting all of the events that IMG does, all the events that UFC does. Those are operator businesses. Those are at-risk businesses that look a lot like the things that we do every day. Content might be different, but they have now decided to be in that business. And Phil Anschutz said something a few months ago to me. He said, well, their business must not be very good because they're starting to get into our business. And why is that? One of it, they're opportunistic, and two, there's been a lot of capital invested in those companies. TPG at CAA, William Morris is out there with a big investor group. And as I said a moment ago, that investor group's going to look for earnings, and they're going to look for it fast. So they're out buying businesses that are, I don't know today if they're completely competitive with what we're doing, but let's just start with, do they need a ticketing company? Do we find out that I open the newspaper next week and WME's done an exclusive ticketing deal with Ticketmaster? I mean, it has a lot of ramifications on what we're going to be doing. The other thing is, the bets just got really big. And, speaking with my A.E.G hat on, when you're putting up a 9-figure guarantee, that would be, those of you that are math and challenge, that'd be 8 zeros and any number in front of it.
Without a decimal?
Without a decimal. Even a lowly 1 in front of 8 zeros is a big number, right? You would agree with me on that.
Yeah.
Is that, and don't take it the wrong way, I want to have a relationship direct with that artist. I want to be there for the pitch. I don't want to just send you the offer. I want to understand what that artist wants to do and whether we're capable of being able to do it. So the dynamic is shifting because the bets are getting bigger. Don't get me wrong, we're still going to need really good agents to book the clubs and the theaters, but even that's starting to be packaged and bundled. Those of you that agents would concede that. So
does that play into the package of why bigger acts don't have agents anymore, a lot of them?
We work with a number of artists. Some of them are older, like the Rolling Stones, who don't have an agent. Roger Waters doesn't have an agent. Paul McCartney doesn't have an agent. But Taylor Swift doesn't have an agent. And I think at some point, we go back and forth, and a big part of our day is competing for the tour. If an artist has a really good promoter that they're really aligned with, that they feel is their partner, then they're going to stick probably with that partner. And if that partner is maximizing the revenue of that artist, finding unique things for them to do in the camp, the whole idea of an agent is to keep everybody apart. They're in the middle. I get it. That's the business. But as the bets get bigger and the dynamic changes between those that are spending and investing, you need a closer relationship. You need a closer relationship to do a better job for the artist. One of the things that my pet peeves when an agent says, well, it's my act. I always go, who says it's your artist? It's our artist. We're in this together. And, I always get asked, well, what's your feeling about that? And for me, the most frustrating thing is if you've got an agent that's really confident in their relationship with their artist, they're in the team. They're in there with it. But if you have an insecure agent that's trying to keep you away and deliver, go to the artist and say, look, I got these 2 great ideas. What's our idea? And it's their idea, but it's not your idea. So I'm always going to not try to go around, but I'm going to try to get in at the time, the pitch is made. If we go in and we whiff and we do a bad job and we lose, then I take full responsibility on it. The part that's frustrating is how much of our pitch, and it's more than the money, it's a lot more than the money, our pitch is being filtered by the bias of the agent. That's the thing that's always frustrating for us on the buy side. But put us in the room, let us represent ourselves, and if the artist walks away and says, yeah, I'd rather work with the other guys, I'm good with that. I'm really good with that.
So we're going to go ahead and open up to the room for questions. Raise your hand. Jim will bring you the mic. Because we are recording for the podcast, please state your name first and last and the company you work for. Who's got a question? Literally no one. Oh, Jake's got one up here.
It's going to be completely self-serving. Jake Gold, the Management Trust. Jay, what is it about Canada and all the big promoters?
One promoter?
You spent time there, John Meglin, Obviously, everybody at Live Nation.
Michael Rapino's Canadian too, I believe.
All of them are.
You guys grow really good promoters in Canada. What can I tell you?
I mean, did you learn something
No,
there that
I
you didn't?
Here's the dirty little secret is, and Jake knows this, is that while touring sort of in the last 5 years has become the way of business in the United States, you almost always had a tour promoter from the back to the inception of the business because there were only 8 markets that mattered in the beginning. Yeah, we found some other ones, that we could go make some money in. But it wasn't practical.
I think Jack did one of your first big tours, and it was like 35, 40 markets.
That was a lot. I think that had Elliot and others going to some really crazy places. But the norm would be, if you're, and I'll just use an arena headliner as an example, the norm would be that you're not going to have 3 different promoters work through the tax, the immigration, trying to figure out the marketing and the promotion and making sure. So we always, in Canada, pretty much, we never really called it touring, but you basically always had Canada as a promoter. You had the one or the other. So the point being is that we all learned a lot. We all learned a lot about how to keep a band on the road and go across the country. And Lisa doesn't believe me when I say this, but we used to have a promoter bus, and I'd sleep in there at night. She can't believe I would do that today, but that's how we did it.
Well, you launched it with Waking Up the Nation tour, Bryan Adams tour.
Yeah, that was a big. That was the first time that we took a big Canadian artist that I did at Universal Concerts. And we had a manager that was frustrated with their promoter and wanted to try a new promoter. And we were suddenly doing, we did 8 festivals in one summer. And that was before the big festival, the curve in the festival business as well.
Anybody else have a question?
I'm Johnny Schumann. I'm a promoter, work for you at A.E.G Live Rocky Mountains in Denver. I wanted to ask you, Jay, what's your advice for a young up-and-coming promoter to really make an impact in the business these days?
And how does he go about getting a raise?
Ask your boss a question.
You got to talk to Brent about the raise, but I think it's a great time for young promoters. I really do. I think that there's a whole generation. I will call myself a tweener because I was not there for the Bill Grahams and the Barry Fays, and they were always like 10 years older than I was. But there's a whole host of us that are in late 50s and early 60s that, Ron Delzner's 80, so he would be the exception. But, most of us probably won't be doing this in 10 years. And you guys will inherit the business. Hopefully we won't screw it up before you inherit it. But that's where we had to wait out our turn, to have these positions in the business. And the other guys they left. And now you guys, you'll have your turn before you know it to run the business.
Hey, Jay. Andy Donner, I lead partnerships for Ticketfly. Your comment about opening up, intrigued and, quite encouraged by that. Could you talk a little bit more about what that looks like, what that means in terms of opening up? I understand the allocation model in the UK, totally got that. But for ticketing companies, what message would you deliver to the Eventbrites, the Ticketflies of the world?
I'd say if I was a ticketing company, and I am, so I'm not telling you what I'm doing, but I think that you're going to make your own distribution deals with the major distributors and be able to offer that as a package when you go in to sell a client. So when you're walking in the front door, you're not just selling Ticketfly, or I'm not just selling Access. You're bringing Amazon, and you're bringing Costco, and you're bringing these other players with American Express with you, and say, it's not just our data. You have the advantage of all the data in the customer base from all these other companies. And I think that's a far more attractive proposition than trying to convince someone that we have more data than Ticketmaster. That probably doesn't compute.
Jay, with A.E.G being private, and with a few years ago when you guys put yourselves on the market, is part of your job now even looking at where the future of A.E.G will be in the next few years, whether you guys will end up going public or look for a strategic partner to possibly buy the company?
Okay, every investor eventually sells someday, right? My own feeling about this is Live Nation will be sold before we are, so we're going to be around for a while. And the only sort of guidance that Phil Anschutz, as the owner, gives me is just go build a good business. Make sure that the bets that you're making are good. Make sure the asset that you're investing in are good assets. Let's build a great company. Frankly, since the time that he took it off the market, we haven't had one conversation about selling. I don't know that. Do I think he'll sell? Yeah, every investor that comes a day that sells. But I do believe that not only, let me just tackle another one because I get this. I'm going to ask myself a question, if you'll let me. But can I do that? I get this question all the time. Well, Phil's not that interested in the music business, right? And he's not a long-term player here, and he's not committed. And I always say, hold on a second. Who has invested more of their own money in the music space than Phil Anschutz in the world? Not investor money, not shareholder money, their own money than Phil Anschutz. So I give him full credit. Someday if he goes to sell, it was his investment. It was all his money. He didn't go borrow it. He doesn't have partners. And someday when he goes to, I hope I help him get the best price. I hope I'm still around for that, but someday all investors sell.
Do you happen to know something about Live Nation selling? Was there something there?
I do not.
All right, Gary had a question.
Yeah, Jay, you were talking about William Morris, and you were deferring to all the events they're doing, as you described Anschutz saying they're getting in our business. But recently, when they bought a number of festivals, and you guys are expanding the number of festivals, whether you're building them or buying them, with William Morris owning festivals, and you've got people booking from them that are working for them, producing the festival, working for William Morris, producing the festival, also booking acts from them, and CAA and everybody else. But with them owning these festivals, how does that play into what you're doing? I mean, that is as direct head-on competition as it gets. So how does that play with your relationship with William Morris in the booking scheme?
Right. I think we all know that conflicts have always existed. Conflicts meaning you shouldn't declare throughout the history of the business, but it's getting ready to become even more conflicted. You're going to have everybody's in everybody's business. They're going to build their own business, and sometimes we'll be partners, and sometimes we'll be buyers, and sometimes we'll be competitors. And I think you just have to get your. By the way, the labels have done that with talent too. Let's think about what very quietly the labels have done. There's been a rights grab, which I think we all sort of went along with. At least we were complicit in that. We said they're going to take some of the artists' earnings because they made the investment early, right? And artists have agreed to do that, and artists are really vulnerable when they're new and they're going to sign a new record contract. But when they start to put clauses in those agreements that says we're going to pick the agent and the promoter, then you start to go, how's that going to affect us on the other side of this? And you're starting to see that in the record labels. So you've got the labels over here doing their thing, trying to take control. You've got the agencies over here changing the way that they do business. Look at CAA. You guys probably don't know this. They quietly got in the ticket business. Not the ticket business that we've been talking about here, but the secondary and the premium market. You know, they're selling tickets today through CAA VIP Experience, and they're packaging some of their own tickets. Every single new tour deals come with a request that CAA handle the VIP ticketing. But then when is the gross the gross? You know, whose gross is it? If you bought it, put up the bet. So, my point is, it's going to be conflict-ridden everywhere. Just get used to it, because everybody's going to be in everybody's business before we know it.
On that note, are you guys going to start investing in acts from the ground up and looking at it as from a 360 holistic way?
Maybe you should hand that. I'd love Gary to answer that because he's president of our talent at A.E.G. And, we talk about that on a daily basis. And I think the only way, frankly, for us to accomplish what we want to do is to get in early, which probably means that we're going to be investors. We'll have all different kind of vehicles to do that, and there'll be different deal structures.
Most acts don't need anything but Spotify today and money
and
behind
marketing.
And marketing, yeah.
So we're going to, and we have, and we're doing more of that, investing at artists earlier in their careers.
I want to thank Jay for taking his time. There's not very many CEOs of a competing corporation that would take time and open up their world to a competing promoter. You've been nothing but a sport all the way through.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
Let's close the book on another episode of Promoter 101. Next week, we will be joined by NS2 talent buyer and Tommy Emmanuel's manager, Brian Penix, as well as Hub Event Insurance, Peter Temkins.
And you can always follow Luke at Luke Pierce or me at The Jew. And of course, you can follow our friend Bill Kittle at Hella Word.
Be sure to subscribe to Promoter 101 wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you like our stuff, or even if you hated it, drop us a review. We want to know what you think.
And you can always email us your thoughts at steiny@promoter101.net. I'm Dan Steinberg, and for my partner Luke Pierce, we are wishing you a great year ahead.
Hey, this is Charlie from Crescent Ballroom, Stateside Present, and the new Van Buren Theater. I'll be a guest on Promoter 101 when I attend my first Polestar Live, and hopefully I'm alive to tell you all about it.